Okay, I'm going to get started, and I want to welcome everybody on to tonight's webinar. My name is Lorna Vanderhaeg. I'm a natural health expert, and I've been researching and writing about nutritional health now for over 35 years. And I'm a mother of 4 and a grandmother of 10. I have a master's in nutrition. I have a second degree in biochemistry, and I have authored 13 books. The very first book I wrote was called The Immune System Cure, when nobody knew what the immune system was. And then I wrote a book on healthy immunity. So if you want to talk to me about the immune system, I can do that as well. And then I wrote books on arthritis and heart health. And I'm best known for all of my hormone books in regards to helping women. So tonight's talk is about the most common nutrient deficiency. And I'm going to do a lot of these webinars on all the different nutrient deficiencies. I talked about magnesium on an Instagram and Facebook post, and it went crazy with the number of questions that people had about what type and when to use it and what conditions it was for. And then I thought, well, the most common nutrient deficiency that has the most widespread health issues is iron deficiency. So I thought we should probably start with that one and talk about it first. So what are the signs of iron deficiency? And I'm going to go over the signs and symptoms of iron deficiency in adults and also in children, because iron deficiency in children is far more devastating than it is in adults. So we're going to talk about adults first and all of our health conditions that are associated with iron deficiency. And so the signs of iron deficiency include things like fatigue, peeling fingernails. So that's when the top edge of your fingernail starts to peel off. Heart palpitations. So you're feeling your heart pound in your throat or your chest. Dark under eye circles. So really look at your kids and your family and your friends. If you have those dark blue circles under your eyes, this is a good indicator that you're iron deficient. And pull your eyelid down and look at the pink area. It should be nice and dark pink. And if it's pale looking, or what we call anemic looking because it's pale, that means that you're probably iron deficient. And it's a simple way to look to see how your kids' iron levels are. Fertility problems are another sign of iron deficiency. Hair loss is a big one. I think the leading reason for hair loss in women is due to iron deficiency. Poor concentration, pale skin, heavy periods. You know, if you have 2 heavy periods in a row, you're going to be iron deficient. 3 or 4 in a row and you're anemic. Breathlessness with exertion. So that's the person who climbs 3 or 4 stairs and feels lightheaded, or, you know, is huffing and puffing. You've got cold hands and feet, restless legs. Restless legs are due to 2 deficiencies, one in iron and the other in magnesium. It's a terrible disorder that keeps people awake at night. And then we have a whole host of sleep disorders that they've now learned are associated with iron deficiency also. No appetite. So if you have absolutely no appetite, it is most likely due to the fact that your iron levels are so incredibly low. Anxiety and depression and other psychiatric disorders are now linked to low iron. And I doubt anyone who's ever been prescribed an antidepressant has been asked to have their iron checked. I'm going to talk about children separately in a minute, but just to give you an idea of things that you would never think about being an iron deficiency in kids, things like temper tantrums, sleep problems, learning disorders. So, you know, iron is so essential for proper functioning in the body. So what causes iron deficiency? And we've heard a lot about diet, you know, vegetarian diets, reduced calorie diets, picky eaters. We know that high dairy consumption blocks the absorption of iron. So if you're that person who gets the 12-ounce latte every day, you may be actually blocking your iron absorption. Blood loss in the form of injury or heavy periods or ulcers is another one. Drugs, things like acid-reducing drugs, or things that you wouldn't even think about as being an iron inhibitor, like calcium carbonate. If you're that person popping Tums all day long, you're inhibiting your body's ability to absorb iron. Just needing more. So if you're pregnant, you need more iron. If you're a child, you need more iron. If you're elderly, you need more iron. If you're breastfeeding, and if you're an athlete. And athletes definitely need more iron, whether they're children or adults. And regular exercise, because sweating promotes iron loss, is also another cause of iron deficiency. Poor absorption. So there were lots of people who asked questions about digestive diseases in the elderly, especially when your hydrochloric acid or your digestive enzymes have reduced. Then, of course, this is another reason why you not only get iron deficiency, but a whole host of other nutrient deficiencies as well. And here's the big one that we've just learned in the last decade: inflammation, infection, and autoimmune disorders. They increase something called hepcidin. And hepcidin is a hormone that basically manages iron in the body. And when your hepcidin goes up, your iron lowers. So we're going to talk about that, because now, just like probably about the same time a decade ago, we learned that 50% of people who have a heart attack have perfectly normal cholesterol and blood pressure, and their heart attack was associated with inflammation. So inflammation is a bad guy. Inflammation is the body's response. It's actually an immune response, and it's a response to invaders. So injury, bacteria, viruses, parasites in the body. And the body creates tons of inflammation, and we know inflammation when we see it. So things like if you slip and fall on the ice and you sprain your ankle or your knee, it's going to get red hot, painful, and swollen. Well, that's inflammation. The inflammation I'm talking about is the kind of inflammation that goes on in your body that you can't see, that is linked to a whole host of conditions. And now we've learned that inflammation is a huge contributor to iron deficiency because of this hepcidin. So let's talk about iron regulation, because it's something that most people don't talk about. And I get a lot of questions about iron toxicity. Oh, I've heard that iron is bad. You shouldn't take iron. You know, iron has all these other negative effects. Well, the interesting thing is the body is so good at, or should be so good at, regulating iron. So iron absorption is tightly regulated by the body. So iron is conserved. It's recycled. So when things, you know, debris and things like that in the body are being recycled, the body takes the iron out and says, hey, I'm going to keep that. It's good stuff. And then iron is also stored, and it's stored as ferritin. So when I'm talking about blood tests and I use the word ferritin, ferritin is your iron storage. So hepcidin is a hormone. It's produced by the liver. It was discovered in 2000, so not very long ago, which means we only have a decade of research in regards to this really interesting hormone called hepcidin. It is literally the master regulator of your iron. It controls whether iron's going to get into your cells or whether it's going to get out of your cells. And despite dietary iron, or dietary supplements of iron, or intermittent blood loss like menstruation, iron should really stay stable in the body. It really shouldn't vary that much. So why isn't it? And this is where the new discovery comes in. We know that hepcidin can be altered by inflammation. So inflammation or infection, which is also another form of inflammation, or errors in our genes. And, you know, right now, genetic research is just burgeoning. We see all of these 23andMe and the DNA company and Ancestry and all of these DNA companies that are taking our DNA. Well, the good thing about that is we're learning a lot about genetic errors in our DNA. And one of the things they found is that with hepcidin is that it can be altered by inflammation in the body, and it can be altered by errors in the genes. And as a result, we end up with either iron deficiency or iron overload. So the thought pattern is that over time, we're going to learn that this iron toxicity or low iron may actually be due to certain genes that manage hepcidin or to inflammation in the body. And so how does this all work? And inflammation and really iron dysregulation, because I get a lot of people who say, I'm taking iron supplements, my iron never goes up. We used to think that they weren't absorbing it properly because they had digestive problems. We used to think they weren't taking the right kind. We used to think they weren't taking enough. But now we're learning that maybe it's actually a form of iron dysregulation by this hormone called hepcidin. So hepcidin increases if there's a lot of circulating iron in your blood. It increases so it can block absorption from the diet. When it does that, when hepcidin goes up, it also reduces your recycled iron that the body makes, and it also converts more iron into ferritin. And the higher your hepcidin goes, the lower your blood levels of iron. So think about it. If you have a dysregulation in your hepcidin and your hepcidin goes way up, you're going to become more and more and more iron deficient. And this is where we see people who still have adequate ferritin, but they have very low hemoglobin levels. Then we have the flip side, because in the body, whenever we do a balancing act, so hepcidin goes up and it lowers your blood levels of iron. But when hepcidin goes down, it increases your bone marrow supplies and your red blood cell production goes up. And then you end up with increasing blood iron and iron stores. So think about this. When your hepcidin gets very low, then you end up with iron overload. So we talk about iron overload in the form of a genetic condition called hemochromatosis. And thankfully, this genetic condition, at least we think it isn't that common. So high iron is generally not very common, whereas low iron is very, very common. So errors in genes, inflammation, and infection are now thought to be a common reason for iron overload or anemia. And inflammation causes hepcidin to increase. So conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, IBS, and infections are associated with anemia. And think about all the research that originally was done on iron in kids. It was done in third world countries where infections like malaria were very, very common. So it wouldn't be uncommon to see a lot of anemia in people who have inflammation and infections. And so errors in genes that regulate hepcidin can cause hepcidin to be low, and hemochromatosis, a genetic condition causing high iron, is associated with low hepcidin. So now when you go and you have your iron tested, you also want to have another test. And this test will be for CRP, and CRP stands for C-reactive protein. It's an inflammatory marker that is produced by your liver. It's a common blood test. Every lab across Canada does CRP as part of our medical service. And so we need to have that inflammatory test because CRP is measuring the amount of inflammation you have in your body, along with our hemoglobin and our ferritin test. So let's talk about the lowdown on low iron. So iron depletion, because there's really 3 stages of iron problems. So iron depletion is when your body uses what's stored. And then, we need iron, so the body stores it for us, because if we ever get in an accident and start bleeding, we need it. Iron deficiency is when your hemoglobin drops and oxygen is diminished. Now, here's the big thing, is that oxygen is carried on hemoglobin. So if you don't have enough hemoglobin, you don't have enough oxygen, and then you feel fatigued and your mental function declines and you just don't have any energy. And that's when you get the reason why under your eyes goes blue when you become iron deficient is because the skin under your eye is very thin and you actually are losing the oxygen in your blood. And what happens when you don't have enough oxygen in your blood? It goes blue. So you end up with this blue tinge under the eyes. And then we have iron deficiency anemia, which is the last stage where we have hemoglobin and ferritin. So ferritin's your iron storage, hemoglobin's floating around on your red blood cells. And when it becomes so low, that's when you don't have enough oxygen being delivered in the body. So as usual, whenever I give these talks, I have to talk about the inadequacies of our current blood testing. So when you go have your iron level tested, you want hemoglobin, you want ferritin, and you want CRP. So the problem is our hemoglobin levels in Canada, their range of normal is so wide that it's, for example, in women, a normal hemoglobin is 117 to 160. So if you're 118, they're going to tell you you're normal. But we really want you to have a hemoglobin around 140. So when you go get your tests, and everybody can now access them online, you want to look at the number and you want your hemoglobin to be around 140, or what I usually say is somewhere in the middle between 117 and 160. Ferritin is even worse. The normal level of ferritin for women is 15, that's 1.5 to 160. So if you're 16, the doctor's going to say, yep, that's normal. It's a little low, but you're still in the normal range. But we know from all the research that's been done out there that our ferritin levels should be between 70 and 100. And if your ferritin is below 70, your hair will fall out. So you definitely want to look at that number. And then because we now know that inflammation is a key contributor to iron dysregulation, we want to have the CRP. And I like the highly specific CRP test. So actually they put a little H and a little S in front of CRP. And you want your CRP to be below 1. If your CRP is above 3, that is a very big concern. It increases your risk of heart disease, a whole host of other health conditions. So you want your CRP to be below 1. If it's above 3, I can guarantee you that it is contributing to iron dysregulation in the body. And the other thing is we eat iron in our daily diet. Well, we should be getting about 20 milligrams of iron from our daily diet. We're getting somewhere around 8. So if you're any of those people that I talked about before, athletes, pregnant women, women who are menstruating, kids, the elderly, basically everyone, if you're not eating 20 milligrams of iron from your diet every day, then you're going to become iron deficient very quickly. And that is why we have such high rates of iron deficiency in these developed countries where we shouldn't have iron deficiency. And then the other contributing factor is that not all the foods we eat have very good absorbable iron either. So compound it with all of the reasons why we get iron deficiency, and then our food may not be providing us with enough iron. The types of iron sources are heme. So one kind of iron source is called heme iron. This is found in animal protein. So beef, lamb, pork, liver, veal, turkey, and chicken, especially the dark meat. Fish and seafood. So that's where you would get heme iron, and up to 25% of heme iron is absorbed. So even in the case of animal-based foods, the absorption of iron is not so great. And then the non-heme form of iron is found in legumes and seeds and nuts and dried fruits and dark vegetables, and of course fortified cereals, because when they manufacture cereals, they take all the good stuff off and then they got to add them back in. So the non-heme or the vegetarian sources of iron tend to be not as easily absorbed. I'm not saying they're not absorbed, I'm just saying they're not absorbed as well. And so often when I talk to vegetarians and vegans or picky eaters, I tell them really, you need to have an iron supplement. So here's another did you know. Kids who drink milk are at an increased risk of iron deficiency. Doctors don't recommend that cow's milk be given to children under the age of 1 year, because calcium blocks iron absorption. Well, this was actually a really positive thing. When they changed the Canada Food Guide last year, I was so excited because they actually removed milk as a beverage. And they changed the beverages to water as a recommendation. So that's a very positive thing, because we do know that dairy products block the absorption of iron. And you may have been listening to the news lately where we have discovered that the Dairy Council has allowed some palmitic acid to be added to dairy cow feed to increase the palmitic acid content of the milk, which is making our butter harder, which is making it more saturated, which is making it less healthy. And thank goodness there was a whistleblower, because now they have told us they're going to take it out, which is awesome. This is the slide I was talking about earlier. So the average North American diet only provides 8 milligrams of iron a day. And if you are not consuming foods that are rich in iron, then you're really going to be in trouble, because we need 20 milligrams of iron per day for optimal iron levels, especially children, pregnant women, the elderly, athletes, menstruating women. Oh, I think that's everybody. So let's talk about iron and some of the health conditions and why we need iron and what does iron do in the body. So iron is needed to make ATP. ATP is manufactured in your mitochondria. Your muscles are loaded with mitochondria, and ATP equals energy. So if you don't have enough ATP because you don't have enough iron, then you are tired, you're lethargic, you can't exercise, you're out of breath, you feel awful, you're freezing cold. Low iron means less oxygen. Literally, that's what it means. And when you have less oxygen, it allows more opportunity for viral infections and bacterial infections. And iron in hemoglobin carries the oxygen. Iron is also found in myoglobin, which is found in your muscles. So this is the connection to energy. And this is the reason why most athletes or people who exercise are very conscious of making sure that they take iron supplements so that they get enough iron. And iron is used for detoxification. Here is a really important point, is that iron competes with other heavy metals, mainly cadmium. So when your iron levels go low, your cadmium levels can go up. And when your iron levels are adequate, they bump out all those toxic heavy metals. So if you've ever gone and had a heavy metal test and your cadmium is high, I bet you any money your iron is low. Iron is also used to make the hormones estrogen and progesterone. So a lot of women, when they start having heavy periods, or when they have, changed their diets or go on restrictive diets, what happens is their iron drops. And then they start finding that they're getting all kinds of hormone issues, issues that would be associated with low estrogen or high estrogen or low progesterone. And so iron is required to make estrogen and progesterone. So you have to have adequate iron levels. And iron is also used to make GABA, which is so important for keeping our moods elevated. And iron is also needed to make serotonin, which is your happy hormone. Your serotonin levels drop, and guess what? Depression, anxiety, mood swings, all of the panic attacks, the feelings of foreboding. And I can't tell you how many women I've talked to in their 40s who get horrifically heavy periods and then start to develop these psychiatric symptoms. Anxiety, panic attacks. They tell me, I wake up in the middle of the night and I just feel like something bad is going to happen. And I doubt that anyone who has ever been prescribed an anti-anxiety medication or an antidepressant has had their iron tested and told, hey, you probably don't need an antidepressant. What you need is to get your iron up into an adequate level so that your body can make GABA and serotonin. So athletes and exercise, and I use the word athletes here, but think about it. I mean, there are people who run every other day. There are people who are in the gym every day. We have children that are on sports teams. We have teenagers that are doing more exercise than you can possibly imagine who do not have adequate nutrients. And iron deficiency symptoms in athletes include things like fatigue and decreased exercise endurance. So you can't work out like you used to. And I'm not talking about the person who, gets to the top of 5 stairs and is huffing and puffing. Although when I had terrible anemia due to heavy periods, I felt exactly like that. I would be gasping for breath by the time I got to a flight of stairs. Increased heart rate is another one. Shortness of breath, headaches, and dizziness are also symptoms of iron deficiency. If you have a teenager, especially teenage girls, who is, in soccer or baseball or track or is a gymnast, and they have any of these symptoms, you really need to get their hemoglobin, their ferritin, and their CRP tested. Athletes lose iron through their sweat. And also because when you do a lot of working out, you're actually building new red blood cells as well. So this is another reason why the body becomes low in iron. It's actually doing work to create more red blood cells. And of course, athletes need lots of oxygen. So we better have enough iron with hemoglobin to carry all that oxygen so that we can get where we need to go. Female athletes that add 10 milligrams of iron supplement per day, and I'm talking about elemental iron. And when I talk about iron supplements, I'm going to teach you how to look for what the proper information is on the label. But if female athletes that add 10 milligrams of elemental iron per day improve endurance and strength in a very short period of time. So we know that athletes or our kids who are at school working out need iron. Let's talk about iron in your hair. It's probably the number, I think it's 2 or 3 in the list of questions that I get every day. And here's the interesting thing. The hair follicles, so the little holes in your head where your hair grows out of, are rich in ferritin. Ferritin is your iron storage. And when ferritin becomes depleted because your iron is dropping, so first we have iron depletion, then we end up seeing that hemoglobin drops, and then we see ferritin drops. So when your ferritin is depleted, the first thing that happens is you start to grow non-pigmented hair. So are we getting gray hair because our iron levels are too low? It could be. The other thing that happens is a lot of people are diagnosed with this androgenic alopecia, which is basically hair loss, when really what they have is anemia. So if you are losing your hair, you need to have your hemoglobin and ferritin and your CRP tested as soon as you can. And you should also add a thyroid test, because in women, the two reasons for hair loss, the first and most common reason is low iron or low ferritin to be exact. And the second reason is low thyroid. So you definitely want to have all of those tested, and simply bringing your iron levels back to that 140 for hemoglobin and 70 for ferritin, and you're going to get this nice thick hair growing back. So if you've started to lose your hair, don't despair. We're able to get it back by using those nutrients. And here's the thing, you don't have to be anemic to lose your hair. This is a big falseness. You know, we literally can be just iron deficient and see dramatic hair loss. When I had the severe anemia because of the heavy periods, my ferritin went to 5 and I nearly went bald. And I probably saw 3 or 4 doctors, and not one of them said the reason why you're losing your hair is because your ferritin is so low. So if you're losing your hair, you want to bring your iron back up. Your ferritin needs to be between 70 and 100. And in BC, they now recommend women have a ferritin of 100. And I have met so many women who have ferritin levels under 10. So you need a ferritin between 70 and 100 to have your hair grow back. And then I would also check my thyroid. And I would look at taking a nutrient called choline stabilized orthosilicic acid, which makes your hair grow very fast, get very thick, and be very strong. So anxiety, depression, and low iron, and there are now dozens and dozens of studies. And if you really want to do your own research, I recommend you go to the public medical library. So if you go to Google and you type in the words PubMed, which stands for short Public Medical Library, you can actually go read all these studies for yourself and find out all this interesting information. But the British Medical Journal published a study in 2020, and they found that people with iron deficiency had a significantly higher risk and incidence of anxiety disorders, depression, sleep disorders, and psychotic disorders. And I just think about the number of women who start developing heavy periods in their 30s, late 30s, and into their 40s, and suffer with these heavy periods for 10 to 15 years. And then they get this terrible anxiety and have this awful depression. And think about our teenagers who are athletes at school, under a lot of stress, with heavy periods, maybe restricting their diet because they don't want to gain weight, and their iron levels are terribly low. And then we wonder why they have mood swings and all of these other things going on. So what is the connection with iron and anxiety and depression? So iron is needed to make dopamine, and a lack of dopamine leads to depression, anxiety, and restless leg syndrome. And other neurotransmitters, including GABA and serotonin, also require iron to be made in the body. So serotonin and GABA, they are associated with elevated mood and a reduction in anxiety and depression. So a lot of us are suffering with anxiety and depression right now because of the lockdown. But I really feel that people should get their iron tested. And, you know, I'm going to do a webinar where I teach people all the lab tests that we should have done, what time of year we should have them done, what the results should be, so that we can have a baseline. And every January, I go and have a whole slew of blood tests and urine tests done. And I've been doing this for decades. So I get to actually look and see what's been going on with me year over year over year. But I can tell you, a few years ago, I had a terrible bout with anxiety. And the MD never asked me how my iron levels were and didn't check them. So it could have very well have been associated with that as well, or at least a contributing factor to these conditions. Brain power. So the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that young women, I think this study that women were between the ages of 14 and 18, they found that those who were iron deficient scored significantly worse on cognitive tests than those with healthy iron. And those women with anemia scored even worse. So they looked at iron deficient, and then they looked at anemic subjects. And then they did 4 months of iron supplementation. And then what they found, they had them do these tests again, different tests, but similar kind of tests. And they scored as well as those who had good iron levels. So this was a really great study showing how quickly you could improve brain function by giving anemic or low iron people iron. And so low IQ and poor mental performance is associated with iron deficiency, especially in kids. And all of these things that I'm talking about in adults also happen to children. Often we don't think about that it could be iron deficiency. So sleep, this is another thing that is disrupted when your iron is low. Restless legs. This is an absolute known problem with restless legs, is that it's associated with low iron and also low magnesium. And so low ferritin, again, here we go to ferritin. So if your doctor is only testing your hemoglobin, that is only one tiny piece of the puzzle. But low ferritin is associated with restless sleep in kids and adults, and sleep disorders that include things like difficulty falling asleep, waking up and not being able to go back to sleep, anxiety around sleep. So think about it. If you have a 4-year-old who is, really battling sleep, it could very well be that they are iron deficient. And what they found in these studies, because there are many, many studies done on kids and iron deficiency anemia and sleep problems, that when they gave them iron and increased their iron levels, they were able to sleep more soundly. Researchers stated that a significant benefit was found when iron supplementation was given, which is really important, because it's one thing to say, we know that all these problems happen, but the best thing is when we can actually show that just giving a simple nutritional supplement, we can show these things improve. So if you have restless legs, that's when you go to bed and your legs just keep moving. And, a lot of people suffer with restless legs. It's a very sleep disrupting problem. The 2 nutrients that I recommend that you take are 10 milligrams of elemental iron per day and 200 milligrams of magnesium bisglycinate. You want to take the iron until your hemoglobin and ferritin are in the mid-range. So not at the bottom of the test levels I was talking about, not at the top, but right in the middle. So iron and fertility, and this is where we get into really important information. So 50% of women during the childbearing years are low in iron, 50%. Really, I don't think any woman should try and get pregnant until her iron is in adequate levels, where that hemoglobin is at 140 and ferritin is around 70 to 100. So if you're thinking about having a baby and you're on tonight's webinar, then you really want to get your iron levels up before you get pregnant. If you're already pregnant, then you got to get busy and you got to get your iron levels up, because iron is needed to make estrogen and progesterone. And inadequate iron, we don't ovulate. So this is the connection between iron deficiency and infertility. And today we have 1 in 6 women of childbearing years that cannot get pregnant. The fertility clinics are full of people who are trying to get pregnant right now. And iron deficiency also does not, it negatively affects egg quality. So you need to have oxygen on your red blood cells in order to have proper egg quality. And so when you are iron deficient, your egg quality declines. So if you're that woman who's gone and you're in a fertility clinic already and they're telling you your egg quality is poor, hopefully they're also telling you that you need to get your iron into adequate levels. And I would say even more than adequate, because you're going to be building a baby soon. And iron also protects against premature births, miscarriage, and low birth weight. So it's absolutely essential. Let's talk about kids. So it's very, very important that if you are anemic or low in iron when you get pregnant, that you get your iron levels up while you were pregnant. And more importantly, you should get them up beforehand. But if you got pregnant and you didn't know, and now you're told that your iron is low, you need to get very focused on increasing it, because you want to deliver a baby that has adequate iron stores. And there's good reason for this, because in children, they found when they're born with low levels of iron that they have a whole host of issues. So let's talk about what some of the symptoms of iron deficiency in kids are. And I would say that iron deficiency in children is extremely serious. I used to get women who would come to visit me in health food stores, and we would be demoing iron. And the woman would be there to talk about herself and her iron needs. And I would see her children tagging along with the big dark purple circles under their eyes and the pale skin. And it's more of a serious problem in children than it is in adults, because their brain is developing. And we actually have seen that there could be lasting abnormalities if iron stores are not increased quickly. So what are some of the symptoms of iron deficiency in kids? And if you're a grandma or a grandpa, or you've got kids and you're really going to care about this, and anyone who loves children is going to care too. So hyperactivity in children followed by exhaustion. So that's the kid who has the full-on temper tantrum and meltdown, but then is completely wiped out afterwards. Difficulty paying attention or performing in school, dark circles under the eyes, and please, everybody look at those dark circles under the eyes. Pale fingernails and inside the lower eyelids. You're going to pull it down and you're going to look how pink is that area, and it should be bright pink. Cracked lips is another one. Poor grades at school, difficulty learning, hard time falling asleep or waking up. So this is the kid that just can't go to bed, has very restless sleep, and then can't get out of bed in the morning. Anxiety or excessive fears. So if your child is terrified to do things and has a lot of anxiety, they really need to have their iron checked. And the great news is that in lots of cities like Vancouver, they have special people who will come and to say Children's Hospital and withdraw the blood in your child. They will not even know that it's being done. So anxiety and excessive fears are another symptoms of iron deficiency in kids. Pica, so you want to chew ice all the time. So if you know anybody who's constantly chewing ice, it's probably they're iron deficient. And in kids that want to chew ice and eat dirt, it could be a sign of iron deficiency. Slow crawling, or late walking, or developmental stages that are completely missed. So your child never really crawled. That could be something that's due to low iron. A short stature. So they've now done quite a bit of research showing that kids that are iron deficient may not achieve their full height. And I always joke about this, but I have a son who's almost 6'8", and he was always super tall. But his favorite food when he was a baby was pureed liver. And so I laugh now. I think I had no idea back then that I was feeding this kid this super height ingredient. And I'm sure his iron levels were quite high. Late speech development may also be a sign of iron deficiency in kids. So you would think iron deficiency is just a problem for people who may not be getting enough food, but this is a report that was in the Journal of Pediatrics and Child Health, where they found that iron deficiency in Canadian infants and children is classified as a severe health concern. So they found 24% of middle-class Vancouver infants are iron deficient. So we're not talking about people who don't have access to food. We are talking about educated people who have access to decent food. 63% of middle-class Edmonton infants are iron deficient. 60% of middle-class Montreal infants and 50.9% of Halifax infants are iron deficient. So this can lead to developmental impairment, ADHD, tantrums, panic attacks, anxiety, a whole host of issues that we really need to be able to deal with. So babies are born with enough iron. If their mom had enough iron when she was pregnant, babies are born with enough iron stores for 6 months. And then after that, they need to be getting about 10 milligrams per day of iron. Anemia in infants causes brain and motor skill development concerns. In children, low iron impacts growth, ability to learn, behavioral problems, low appetite. So if you have that kid who just never wants to eat anything, they really should have their iron checked. Impaired immunity is another sign of iron deficiency. They have more infections, they lack energy. Teens, so 10 to 20% of girls are depleted or iron deficient, and mood and energy are affected. So if you have the teenager with a lot of mood swings, could very well be due to this. So how much iron do kids need? And to prevent iron deficiency, this is to prevent iron deficiency. And remember, kids are picky eaters. They don't eat a lot of meat-based foods. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I remember when my kids were little, I had to hide everything in their shake every day. I used to open up all their nutrients into the shake because they hardly ate anything that I wanted them to eat. And a lot of kids are the pasta and white sauce kids. So they're definitely not getting enough iron. So children 7 months to 13 years old need 10 milligrams of elemental iron, the same amount of iron as grown-ups need. Girls 14 to 18-year-olds need more. They need 15 milligrams of elemental iron, and boys 14 to 18 need 10 milligrams of elemental iron. And a doctor may prescribe more. So I have a grandchild that has very low iron, and the doctor has prescribed quite a bit more elemental iron. And her mom had bleed while while she was pregnant. And of course, then she and the baby were both iron deficient. So here's the other thing is high dose iron is often prescribed, but it's not recommended long-term. So if you've gone to your doctor and the doctor's prescribed 300 milligrams of elemental iron, you really are only supposed to take that for about 3 months. And the crazy thing is most people can't even take it for 3 months because doctor prescribed iron causes such terrible constipation that most women or men will not take it long enough to actually get their hemoglobin or ferritin levels to go up. But the recommendation is that high dose iron, which would be something around 300 milligrams, is not recommended to be taken for longer than 3 months. And low dose iron is a way safer option and just as effective without the side effects. So why is high dose iron a bad thing long term? Well, the first thing is for potential iron overload, which although that is actually rare, we still want to be aware of the fact that if you took too much for too long, you could potentially have iron overload. Gastric irritation. So if you get black stools, the reason why your stools go black is because your digestive tract's actually bleeding. It's irritated. And if you get pain, diarrhea, or constipation, those are also symptoms that are caused from long-term high-dose iron. And here's the other confusing thing. Often you'll buy a product. If it does not tell you the elemental dose of the iron, do not buy it. If it just says, you know, iron ferrous fumarate, 300 milligrams. You don't know if you're getting 300 milligrams or 30 milligrams. And so that is a very important thing. You want to know what the elemental level of the iron is because that's the actual amount of iron that you're going to get. And some iron supplements, for example, could say 300 milligrams, but you would only be getting 28 milligrams of elemental iron. So it's important to really notice that. And I wish that Health Canada would mandate that every iron supplement sold in the country has to list the elemental form of iron, because the iron that I recommend comes in up to a 15 milligram dose. And then people say, well, should I take X number, multiply that until I get to 300 milligrams? And the answer is absolutely not, because that would not be a good thing. And following the directions is always important. So this is an iron absorption comparison. So the most common irons that are prescribed are ferrous fumarate and ferrous sulfate. They have probably the worst absorption. And then there's been a lot of research over the last couple of decades on a very unique form of iron called iron pyrophosphate. And iron pyrophosphate can also be found microencapsulated. So what that means is that they coat the iron with a substance that's made out of lecithin, which is a fat, and a starch. And they do that for very important reasons. It actually improves the iron. So if you look at this particular comparison study that was done, they had people take iron and orally, and then they tested their iron in serum. And they found that the microencapsulated iron pyrophosphate The absorption was almost double to regular iron pyrophosphate. So make sure you look for the ones that have the improved coating on them. And then ferrous fumarate was less, much less, and ferrous sulfate was even less than that in regards to the absorption of the iron. So my favorite iron is iron pyrophosphate, and I like the one that is coated with starch and lecithin because this has lots of great benefits. So what are the benefits of microencapsulation? And microencapsulation has been around in the health food industry for decades. For example, if anyone ever took my Protein Smart protein, the CLA in the protein is microencapsulated. And that's the reason why a lot of the fats that are sold out there that are in powder form are microencapsulated so you can make an oil into a powder. Well, the same kind of concept goes on with other products that are microencapsulated. And when we microencapsulate iron or coat it, it tastes great. So iron tastes bad. It has a horrible metallic taste in the mouth. And in order to get rid of that awful metallic taste, it has to be microencapsulated. Otherwise, it tastes like rusty nails in your mouth. Also, if the iron is not microencapsulated, it turns your teeth gray. And in my office, I have all the children's and baby iron supplements, and they actually have a warning on the bottle that says long-term use will turn your teeth gray. Actually, short-term use will turn your teeth gray. So it has to be microencapsulated in order for it to stop your teeth from turning gray. As well, when we microencapsulate things, it reduces digestive upset, it stops constipation. You don't need high doses. That's the other thing. So when someone asks me, should I take a lot of this? I say no, because you don't need to, because you're going to get adequate absorption. The reason is you can take it with other nutrients. So in the past, we've told people don't take your iron supplement with calcium. Don't take your iron supplement with zinc because it won't get absorbed properly. But when you have this iron pyrophosphate that is microencapsulated, that does not happen. And so what is the dosage for adults? It's 15 milligrams per day. And for pregnant women, it would be 30 milligrams a day. So that's what we would recommend if you're pregnant and if you're just a regular average person. If you have terrible heavy flooding periods, then please take the 30 milligrams per day as well. Before I forget, here is the discount code. So the discount code that you can use at Healthy Planet is Lorna15. And that discount code is good for 6 days, and then it doesn't work any longer. And I want you to go to my new website, which is www.lornahealth.com. I sold my nutritional supplement line to Jameson Wellness in 2014. So I've now got a brand new website that you can go visit. And I would love it if you signed up for my e-letter. You can enter to win a personal nutritional consultation with me. If you want to send me personal emails, my personal email that I answer for questions is lorna@lornahealth. And you want to go to Lorna Health, Lorna health.com. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram. So you might want to also just text us and let us know what is your favorite form of social media. Do you like Instagram? Do you like Facebook? Do you prefer to be contacted directly by email? So any of those types of things. And when you sign up, you can tell, when you sign up for my newsletter, you can also let me know what subjects you're interested in. So someone asked me, are nutritional deficiencies the same for men and women? Pretty much so. I mean, women have more blood loss, especially menstruating women. Women tend not to be big meat eaters. Men tend to eat more red or flesh-based foods, I would say, than women do. And so we tend to be more deficient in iron than men do, but men can also be iron deficient. So it's important they get their iron tested as well. I'm going to scroll through some of these questions. What about the combo of D3 and K2? Every single person in this country from the time you are 1 year old and up should be taking vitamin D3. And I mean everyone. So every single person on this webinar tonight should be taking vitamin D3 every single day. And we're taking that because vitamin D3 is incredibly protective. It gets your immune system to work. It helps you deal with viruses and bacteria, and especially COVID. There's just been a brand new news report that came out today saying that it is essential to take it to help protect yourself, to prevent COVID. And if you do get COVID, to reduce the symptoms of COVID. But vitamin D protects you against certain types of cancer. People who have high levels of vitamin D3 have a better protection from colon cancer and breast cancer. And of course, if you live in Canada, you're wrapped up in a parka most of the year. We're not making vitamin D3 on our skin from sunshine. And this winter, we have not even been able to go away and lie on the sandy beaches. So we're definitely going to be vitamin D3 deficient if we don't take it. If you're going to take K2, I like the MK7 variety. Yes, it is great to take vitamin D3 and K2 together. In Europe, K2 is actually recommended for children to stop osteoporosis, and it's also important for heart health. If we just took, here's the crazy thing, is that most people do not even buy a decent multivitamin and mineral for their children. Think about it. This is when your body is growing at the fastest rate, when you don't eat very well. Every mom knows we're always trying to get our kids to eat better. So if we started very young and every child took a multivitamin with minerals, just a multivitamin with minerals, not a gummy and not a Flintstones, but a good multivitamin with minerals, just think of the transformation we could make in our body. What is the normal range of iron in the blood for menopause? And it is possible that you can be too low. So the numbers that I put on the screen, I'm going to go back to them so you can look at what they should be in case you didn't write them down, because now when you go get tested, you're going to look at your results. You want your hemoglobin to be at 140. You want your ferritin to be between 70 and 100. And you want your CRP to be less than 1. Oh yes, okay. So if you've been told by your doctor that you have too much iron or that you have hemochromatosis, people have now been getting their genetics tested. So now they know that they have the gene for hemochromatosis. Doesn't even mean you're going to get it if you have the gene for hemochromatosis. But if you've been told by your doctor that your iron is high, what do we do in that case? A lot of what we do is we give blood. We go give blood. If your iron levels are too high, you're not going to be the person who takes an iron supplement. You're going to get your CRP tested to see if where your inflammation is at, and you're going to give blood. The funny thing is, if your iron is too high, they don't even use your blood because it's not good for anybody. Here's a question about rhodiola. Is rhodiola safe for people who take blood pressure medication? Well, here's the thing. I would not take rhodiola if you're on blood pressure medication, but I would take magnesium bisglycinate 200 milligrams per day. And I would also take a lot of blueberry extract, eat a lot of blueberries, drink a lot of blueberry juice that's unsweetened, just straight blueberry juice, because it's been found to lower blood pressure. And guess what I just discovered? So here's the leading reason for high blood pressure in women: dehydration. So if you are not drinking a lot of water, your body secretes something called vasopressin, which causes your blood pressure to go up. So who would have thought that water could help us reduce our blood pressure? So no, don't take rhodiola if you're on high blood pressure medication. Let's get your high blood pressure gone by using key nutrients. In regards to the person who asked me about iron after having a baby and hair loss, absolutely. I mean, think about it. You had a baby, you had a big blood loss because you had a baby. Of course, your hair is going to get thin. This is an old wives' tale that having a baby, this is the reason why your hair falls out. Your hair falls out after you have a baby because you have an iron deficiency or an iron deficiency anemia, and you really need iron supplements. And you absolutely needed iron anyways, especially if you were breastfeeding, and because you want your baby, if you're breastfeeding, to get more iron. Okay, If you are a vegetarian and you have lots of allergies, what would you do? Well, if you're a vegetarian, you have to supplement your diet with protein. There are lots of awesome plant-based proteins. Make shakes for those kids, put iron into their shake, make sure they have iron. And if someone has a lot of allergies, they need to take Moducare. Moducare is the greatest thing for allergies. It comes in a chewable for kids. It comes in capsules for adults. And I should do a whole talk on allergies because we'd be able to get rid of a lot of these allergies. And probably with all of us wearing masks, we're not going to have as bad allergies. Yes, Moducare, Moducare. And I wrote in my first book way back in 1998 all about Moducare because it has such excellent clinical research for all kinds of immune problems, of which allergies are an immune problem. I've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to try and see who else I can help in 3 minutes. What should you take on a daily basis? So here is the few things that I recommend people take every day. A great multivitamin with minerals, and take it with food. If you take a multivitamin with minerals on an empty stomach, they kind of make you feel ick. You want fatty acids and fish oil, and you need at least 4,000 milligrams of fish oil a day. And that is according to the PhD, Bruce Holub, who said that is the level that we should be taking. So you need 4,000 milligrams of fish oil per day. And everyone who is over the age of 30 should add CoQ10. CoQ10 is for your heart. It's for your mitochondria. And it also is beautiful for your skin. So those are the 3 things I would take every day. And that's just basic nutrition. And eat protein, green veggies, and healthy fats in your diet. And you know, it doesn't matter if you're 25 or 50 or 60, you should be taking those nutrients every day. So 4,000 milligrams of fish oil, multivitamin, and a good multivitamin. So actually look at the form of the multivitamins, and I'm not talking about the gummies that you buy at Costco. Those are candy. And so if you're taking candy, you cannot classify that as a nutritional supplement. Yes, iron deficiency has to do with the neurotransmitter dopamine. That's why you have to take iron so that your dopamine functions properly. Oh, let's see what else we can answer. When is the best time to take a green drink? You can drink it whenever you like. You need protein, and if you are a woman who sits in a chair all day and does nothing, you need 30 grams of protein. So definitely I recommend that you supplement with a protein shake, and make sure your kids are getting protein shakes. Make them a yummy, plant-based protein shake every day. Pour all the goodies in the shake. They won't even know that they're getting the nutrients that you're adding to their shake. The iron, oh, ferrous gluconate. I really feel like we just should not be taking these nasty forms of iron anymore. Ferrous means iron. So ferrous gluconate, ferrous sulfate, ferrous fumarate. I don't like them. They are not good forms of iron. They are not absorbed properly. They cause a ton of gastrointestinal effects. Go buy yourself a great bottle of iron pyrophosphate. My daughter started a brand new company. It's a kids company called Kidstar Nutrients. And so if you've got kids, you want to look at her supplements as well. But get yourself a good quality iron pyrophosphate that is microencapsulated. If you missed all the information that I talked about and you just got on the call late, don't worry, we are going to send you my webinar. And if you sign up for my newsletter, and please sign up for my newsletter, because then I get to talk to you guys directly and share information with you. Then you will also get notification of the link to the webinar as soon as we have it up in the next couple of days. Migraine headaches, they're often caused by low progesterone in women, especially if they're before their period. And we treat them with butter burr and also with magnesium bisglycinate. And I really want to do a talk on just magnesium, because there are 300 reactions in the body require magnesium to do its job. So look for magnesium bisglycinate if you suffer with migraines. Don't worry if I didn't get to your question. I will be answering people's questions over the next few days, and please keep in touch. I'm going to go to the end of my talk so that you can write down the website, the code for, excuse me, the discount code is Lorna15. So go to Healthy Planet and use your Lorna15 discount code. It is only good for the next 6 days. Go to my website at lornahealth.com, sign up for my e-letter, please, and follow me on your favorite social media, whether that's Instagram or Facebook. And my new everything is at Lorna Vanderhaeg. So thank you so much for everybody coming on the webinar this evening, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Take care. Have a great night. Bye-bye.